guess what? I finished the top for my very first cave quilt. I'm going to share everything about this quilt with you in this video. If you look right here, do you see this? This is a slight preview of the cave quilt that I made. This is the first time that I have made a quilt top with Kaffe Fassett fabrics. I have to say, I am so pleased with the way that it came out. If you are new to my channel, my name is Kristen with IC Stars Quilting, and I share tips, tricks, and tutorials to make the modern quilting process easier for you. So if you are not new to my channel, welcome back. It's so good to see you again. Let's have some fun, okay? So this is a Kaffe Fassett quilt project that I worked on. I do not have it quilted just yet. That is gonna have to be something that is in a couple more videos. I still got a couple quilts in line ahead of this. So here is the final reveal of my Kaffe Fassett quilt project. Again, I am in love with the way that this quilt project turned out. The advice that I got and the ideas that sprung from last week's video, which by the way, I'm gonna put a link across the top if you missed that. I got a ton of inspiration just from the ideas and seeing the photos that somebody else has done with their cave quilt projects. If you sent me an email with pictures of your cave quilt in it, thank you so much. That was really, really helpful just to jog my creative brain and get some new ideas and some inspiring nuggets of information in there that I could play with while I was working on this. So in the previous video, I showed you 3 different quilt patterns, and let's go through those one more time real quick. Here is pattern number 1. Here is pattern number 2. And here was pattern choice number 3. Now, I went through all of your comments, so many comments, and I tallied up which one actually got the most votes. And it was really, really close between pattern number 1 and pattern number 2, with pattern number 3 in the way, way behind. But I had already picked out pattern number 3. So, ta-da! This is just to show you that, you know, everybody has different views on these patterns and everybody has different ideas of what they can look like. Now, I did do things a little bit differently, okay? You know, it wouldn't be a Kristen and IC Stars quilting project without making things a little bit of a twist in there, right? I had to do something a little bit different on my end to make it feel like it was my own. So 1, I did not do that stripy border that was around the outside of pattern number 3. I chose to pick this blue Kaffe fabric that I picked out from the store. I got yardage of it. I had a lot of people suggest to do a stained glass pattern with the Kaffe fabrics because they show up really, really nicely. You know what? I think that's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. By the time I was seeing those comments, I had already been cutting my fabrics and I had already chosen the pattern that I wanted to make. But I think that that's really, really smart. And I think that if you want to take it in that way and make a stained glass pattern with the Kaffe fabrics, I think it's brilliant. I think it would be gorgeous. But in hearing that, I kind of had a little bit of inspiration. So in the finished quilt top, you can see that I put a really, really skinny black border in between the blue outside border and the kind of radiating diamonds out of the middle of the quilt, right? You see that little thin black line? That was kind of a stained glass inspired window look, okay? And then eventually I'm gonna have it quilted, and then I'm going to put a black binding all the way around the outside of the quilt too. So you'll have this border that kind of matches the binding on the outside of the quilt as well. So I think it's gonna be really, really gorgeous. I can't wait to see it finished. And yes, I'm gonna totally show you what it looks like when it's finished. Let's talk about the making of this quilt. I took this pattern as a suggestion. Okay, the way that the pattern was written in the book, I took it as a suggestion because I love the way that the pattern was written. It was very easy to understand, very simple to read, but I felt like it was a little bit more work intensive than it needed to be. For instance, they had the half square triangles that are in the pattern. He had you cutting the squares and then cutting them on the diagonal to make the triangles, and then taking 2 triangles and sewing them together. I felt that was excessive. Maybe it's not, but like I don't have all the time in the world to be working on sewing. I usually try and do things in a much more timely manner. Same results, just a different way to do it. Neither is right or wrong, but for me personally, I did the math and I figured out how big, because I was working with fat quarters, right? I also wanted to make sure that I got as much bang for my buck with the fat quarters. I figured out how to make the same half square triangle sizes at 8 at a time, okay? I actually have a video with a tutorial on how to make the half square triangles 8 at a time. I'm gonna link that across the top of the screen for you so that you can see that video. There is a little bit of math involved to like get up to figuring out like what you want your finished size to be, but it was worth it for me because I did not have to do as much, you know, perfection and cutting and sewing and all of that. If you've taken any of my classes before, you will know that I am a huge fan of doing things in bulk. Okay, so doing my task in bulk. I will often cut out all of my pieces, label them accordingly to the pattern. So the next step here is to take all of these and get them ironed and pressed so that we can then have our half square triangles to lay out on the design board. Now, when I am pressing my half square triangles, I always press them to the dark side, and I tend to go fairly quickly. But one thing that I'm doing with this that you can't tell is I don't put a lot of weight on my wrist or on the iron while I am ironing these. Now I have that tiny iron. I use that tiny iron all the time, okay? All the time. I love it. So it doesn't weigh a whole lot, but you want to avoid really pulling and stretching on your fabrics. Really, I just kind of let the little push of the iron be the thing that puts the fabric flat, okay? So you don't want to pull or distort your half square triangles because they're not going to end up square. If you pull and distort them anyway, they're not going to end up square, and then it's going to end up being kind of like a nightmare when you go to sew it. Another question that I get often is on the half square triangles, do you trim all the little ears off? Yeah, I do. I go through at the very end after I've done all of my cutting and all of my ironing, and I go and trim off all those little ears because it just adds extra bulk to the quilt top, and that's just not something that I really like to deal with. I'm gonna give you a quick sneak peek while I'm working on this today. I'm kind of laying out my pieces for the quilt pattern. What I have right here is my different pieces, okay? So these are all my half square triangles. These are all my purple pieces. These are my black center blocks. These are my blue pieces, and these are the ones that I just decided were actually like part of it, but because I didn't fussy cut these, they ended up being, you know, not quite in the right color palette. Yes, this has purple in it, but it has more green, and it pulls that green and it draws your eye to that green. I'm selectively choosing which blocks are going onto my quilt. So these so far have not made the cut, but let me show you a little bit more of what I've been doing. So I am kind of going through and picking which ones work at the right time. As you can see, this is more solid blue, while this one pulls more, you know, gray and light blue in there, and so on and so forth. Same with like the purple ones too. They're a little bit, you know, some of them are lighter, some of them are darker, some of them are more bolder. There's another one that's probably not going to make the cut. It's got more green in it. And then these as well, some of them have that dark purple. Now, as I'm going to my board here, I'm trying really hard to vary these because I really, really want that scrappy look, right? Okay, so I'm gonna pull back so you can see a little bit here. That scrappy look, you can see how that diamond is forming, right? Even with those little corner squares there, those like, I don't know what you want to call them, like center squares, cornerstones, whatever you want to call them, they're still there, right? And so I am putting my squares up here. I started with this part in the center here because this was a favorite fabric of the girl that let me use her fabrics for this video. She said, I've got too many Kaffe Fat Quarters. What do? I said, send it to me. And I am going to, you know, make something really cool out of it. So I started with those center ones and then I started radiating out. Now I can see as I step back right here, I can see, hey, you know what? This piece right there actually kind of stands out. It doesn't look purple to me, right? So I want these to look varied and I want them to look very scrappy, but I certainly want that purple stripe around there so that the blues set off as well. Now, this is a very, very scrappy quilt, okay? So I'm not going to get everything perfect on here because that's the idea, is I want it very scrappy. I don't want it super uniformed and like perfect, right? I want it scrappy. So this is what I've got going on. I did say this one right here, that one's gonna change because it looks way too light. It almost blends in with this one over here, and this is my blue stripe right here. So I wanna take this one out. Actually, let's do that now. What do I have here? Let's see. Maybe this, nope, I've got some other ones that are around it here. Let me show you what I'm looking at here. Nope, maybe this one will work. Okay, so what I'm doing, and you didn't see that in the planning, was I originally pulled up this piece of fabric right here, and I thought, you know what, that's a really good one. I like that one. But what happens is this one, and this one are all very similar to that, and I don't want like areas of similarity. I want that scrappy look. So I'm gonna try in this one right here, which is still a nice bold color, purple, but you see the difference in that made? And actually I can see that this one down here is looking a little bit light too. This one I can put here. Maybe. I might change that because these two are really similar now. But, you know, it doesn't take magic to do these. It actually just takes some patience and some, you know, back and forth. I do this a lot. I step all the way back, I look at my quilt, and then I go up and I make changes, right? I go up and I make changes. It doesn't have to be perfect, like I said, but you know what? If something bothers you, go ahead and fix it. And continue looking, changing things. I tried really hard in here not to get similar fabrics right next to each other. And here it kind of did happen, but this doesn't bother me so much because I've got this blue here and green and then this one right here. And it, like, overall, I think it looks really nice. Now, I told you I did a whole lot of math to make sure that I was getting the 8 half square triangles at a time. I did not do a whole lot of math when it came to, I have this many fat quarters and how big of a quilt is that going to get me, right? So this is what I did in terms of figuring out how big this quilt was gonna be. This is the limits of my design board. Yeah, so I laid out all of my squares, and by the way, those ended up being 4.5 inches in height and width. All over. So each of those squares are 4.5 inches, and that's the limits of my design board. And I decided that was going to be the middle of the quilt. I was going to add some borders to it, and it was going to be a nice large throw quilt that was just going to be a good comfortable size for one person. I at one point had like another border that I was going to do around the outside, but I decided against it once I found that blue border fabric and just let that be it. But I was very, very frugal with my fabrics. This is what I have left over from my fat quarters that I used. You can see I'm very, very frugal with my cutting. I do go through and press each one of my fat quarters flat before I do any cutting. That way I can make sure that there's no wrinkles, there's no room for error, there's no accidental folds or creases or anything like that that is going to get me off on my cutting. To piece all of these little bitty 4.5 inch square pieces together and get accurate corners, I use the method of chain piecing. Now, if you haven't done chain piecing before, I'm going to put a link across the top of the screen to a tutorial for it that I have on YouTube. And I'm also going to put a link in the description box down below. You'll find all the links down below as well. But it's a very easy, straightforward way to make sure that you get those nice, perfect square corners, okay? They look so lovely. I show you in the tutorial step by step how to make this work together. So then what I have left to do on this quilt is to go put it on my long arm machine, get it quilted, and then I gotta bind it, and then it'll be done and it'll be beautiful. Now this is definitely not a minimal quilt, okay? It's very loud, it's very fun, it's very colorful, and it's very happy, which I think is probably the goal for Kaffe Fassett when he designs all of his fabrics, is loud, beautiful, happy, joyful, exciting, and flowery. Okay, let's go with that. I think that's like the main goal with his fabrics, and I think this quilt really does it justice. I hope that you enjoyed that peek into this beautiful quilt, seeing the top come together. I thank you so much for your insight and your voting in the last video. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you think that I did this fabric justice, or if you would have done something completely different, okay? I would love to know, because I think when you kind of read through the comments down below, we get into this conversation and you start to learn things just from other people's perspective. As long as everything is respectful and kind, with respect to the other creators for having different opinions, we can all learn from each other and we can get some brilliant ideas. I encourage you to read through the comments in some of my older videos too, because there are some really, really good tips in there. I absolutely love it. So thank you so much for your feedback and for your ideas on this quilt project. I have much more to come in the future. I'm really trying to wrap up those works in progress. I'm not gonna lie, I still have a lot of them. Okay, I get really excited when a new project comes in and I want to start working on it right now, and I think it's fine, I'll just put this to the side for a little bit, whatever I've been working on, and then I never pick it up again because I have, you know, shiny squirrel syndrome where there's always something new and exciting to work on. But I'm focusing, I'm trying really hard, finish all those works in progress, right? Finish all those works in progress. So if you're in that boat with me too, let me know in the comments down below that I am not alone in this, okay? If you have not subscribed to my channel, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I love the encouragement that it gives me to create new videos and to try new things and to figure out new ways to show you things that make your life easier, right? Quilting needs to be fun. It needs to be a joyful activity. We don't need to be frustrated doing it. Join me again for next week when I have more of those works in progress to show you, all right? I'll talk to you soon. I'm Kristen with ICStarsQuilting.com. Have a wonderful day. Bye.